wanted to start off and share a little bit of a backstory about why I'm so passionate about a primary sector. And I think you can see on the screen, I'm lucky enough to be from a sheep, beef and deer farm in Southland, where I grew up with my brother, my mum and my dad. You can see me on screen playing with some of my pets and some of the farm animals. And that was my favourite thing to do. Head out after school, go help Dad on the farm. And today my brother is down there farming, although there's about 3 rotary milking sheds instead of the wool shed and the cattle yards. But I love going down there, seeing the passion they have for the land and for the animals, and I think that's driven my passion to try and find a career where I can add value to that in some way, quite indirectly sometimes, but I think more directly now with my role at AgriZero. Yeah, you can also see I had a passion for bad haircuts, and that's probably going to continue. Sorry, I'm just clicking, and it's not quite working. Oh, thank you. Someone's helping me backstage, that's amazing. So I'm really passionate about my work on reducing emissions from agriculture, but not reducing profit. In fact, it's just the opposite. And why must we reduce agricultural emissions? Now, this is a question. New Zealand, it's true. We are really a slither when you look globally at our impact on global emissions. And our farmers are already doing a pretty damn good job. But the fact is, we rely on an international market that we export to. We export by far the majority of what we produce. About 95% of the milk from this country goes offshore. The world's biggest producer and world's biggest exporter of dairy and the biggest exporter of lamb. So we really rely on meeting what the market is asking for. And what the market is asking for quite clearly is a lower emissions product. And so how do we do that in the right way that benefits both farmers and the end consumer and customer as well? Last year it was about 55 billion that we sent offshore. Over 80% of our exports, merchandise exports, are coming from agriculture. So it's critical actually that we listen to what the market's asking for. We can't deny it if we want to sell our product at a premium, at a profit. Some examples on the slide. Danone, big global company, we sell lots to them. I've sat in many meetings in previous lives with Danone, trying to show them a roadmap for how we're going to help them reduce emissions. They have a specific goal of 30% reduction in methane, specifically methane, by 2030. Sainsbury's, we sell a lot to Sainsbury's. They buy quite a lot of meat from New Zealand. 36.4% emissions reduction they're aiming for, Scope 3 emissions, by 2030, which is coming up quickly. Another thing is our free trade agreements. If you talk to Vangelli, our lead trade negotiator, he is faced with many very explicit questions on what are we doing in New Zealand to reduce agricultural emissions. Farmers in other countries don't always love the fact that New Zealanders are sending product, often more sustainable product when you look at it, into their countries and competing with them. He will get asked, over 90% in some of his appearances in front of parliaments are about sustainability and about emissions, and many questions specifically on methane as well. So we're actually at risk of breaching these trade agreements. There's sanctionable commitments in our EU trade agreement relating to the Paris Agreement. So I think it's quite clear that we've got to do something. We've got to keep going. So it all sounds a little bit dire for farmers. You know, that farmers are facing a lot of pressure right now, not only on their P&L with some reducing profits, but also that the fingers are pointing on the environment. They're feeling, you know, here they are working, doing their best, but a lot of people pointing the finger, feeling like they're sort of a climate, you know, ruining our climate. Actually, they're just trying to do their best to farm the land that they've got in the best way that they know how. There's a lot of regulatory pressure increasing on farmers too. Now they're being asked to reduce emissions, but what tools have they got? There's not a lot of things available today. But help is coming. Help is coming, and help is coming in the way of finance, for example. So we're now starting to see incentive payments. We need to see a lot more of it to encourage the behaviour, to make it really stack up for farmers to move that transition to lower emissions product. Nestle are offering a payment through Fonterra to farmers for low emissions milk. I was on a bus tour recently with Nestle and Synlait. They have invested millions with Synlait partnering to put mitigations on farm over 43 farms in the South Island. They really care about it because dairy is Nestle's biggest ingredient. It's the biggest impact on their Scope 3 emissions, and they've set a really aggressive, very aggressive target, 50% reduction by 2030. And they buy billions from New Zealand, so they really care. But they're doing something about it. They're actually helping. There's the demonstration farm I was lucky to visit recently in Taranaki. You know, that's a lot of financial help that these companies are now starting to do, but we need to see more of it. The government last week announced another $50 million of funding into the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre. That's amazing because that centre has been working for decades, actually the longest and the hardest anywhere in the world, looking at this problem of agricultural emissions. How do you reduce it in a pasture-based environment? It's actually not easy. And there's a reason why we've been looking at longest and hardest, and that's because we rely on trade. Banks are coming in now with help on, improved terms. If you're doing a project on farm to reduce emissions, it could be a capital project that you're doing or buying an asset to help you farm in a more sustainable way. So that's been really good to see as well. We need to see more of this because it has to stack up for farmers. The cost benefit really has to make sense. So, New Zealand, we're predominantly grass-fed, pasture-based farmers. We're actually farming pasture, and then the animals are eating it. And we're very innovative. We're renowned globally as being innovative pasture-based farmers, and we want to really maintain that way of farming because it brings a lot of benefit to us, and we need to keep doing more on promoting that style of farming, really from the animal welfare perspective, but also from the nutrition perspective. The products coming out of a grass-fed animal have more nutrition as well. So, we're very good at growing pasture in New Zealand too. Despite extreme weather, changing climate, it is a bit soul-destroying as a farmer when you're looking at a paddock that's dried up in drought or been washed away, your new planted crop because of a flood. I think we're all becoming more and more aware, even in the farming community, that something needs to be done. So our farmers are quite unique because the very thing that is our advantage is also a big challenge. Pasture-based farming is quite low input. You look at a lot of our big global export competitors, they are in an intensive system, a barn or a feedlot. I've visited some of these barns overseas where the cows are. They've got fans blowing at them to keep them cool in summer. They've got a metal rod that they can scratch their back on. It just doesn't feel great to me as a Southern girl, comparing that to how we do things in New Zealand. But what it does mean for those intensive systems is a lot easier access to change the system, to input into the system to reduce emissions. So you can have a big anaerobic digester on the side of your barn, capturing all the effluent and converting that methane. You can also put a feed additive very easily into the feed, the total mixed ration they're eating of every bite. Very different when your animal is out grazing. So the focus, and I guess a big gap in opportunity for climate, but also a market opportunity, is finding solutions for a pasture-based system. These extensive grazing systems, actually 80% approximately of the world's methane is burped up by animals, by ruminants that are in this extensive grazing grassland type system, not in a feedlot or a barn. So New Zealand has this opportunity to pioneer these solutions and actually lead the world, show the world what can work in a lower input system and have a material impact not only on the Scope 3 supply chains of our customers, but also globally, showing the way for some of these lesser developed nations, the global south, India, Africa, South America. So we need a lot of innovation, right? We heard there's some cash support coming, but we need a lot of innovation and we need investment in innovation. And that's, I'll introduce a little bit to you about AgriZero. If some of you have probably heard me say this, and I apologise in advance. For the others, AgriZero, we're a public-private partnership. We're actually a really new model to try and approach this gnarly problem of reducing emissions in agriculture in New Zealand. So it's a partnership between the New Zealand government and a lot of the major agribusinesses. So it's a 50-50 partnership where the private sector businesses, A2, ANZ, ASB, ANZCO, Fonterra, Rabobank, Ravensdown, Synlait, Silverfern Farms, a couple more to be announced soon, put financial contributions into our fund, and then the government match those contributions dollar for dollar. And our focus and purpose is to invest in tools and technology for farmers, to accelerate the deployment of that technology without impacting negatively the profitability or productivity of those farmers. So that is what we're doing, and we have venture capital funding and we have catalyst funding too. And we're going out, we're scanning the world for solutions, and we're investing in things that we think will work in our current farming system. So we've scanned a lot. 170 things have gone through our market canvas. 90 of them we've chucked out already. There's a few on the long list still to explore that don't make a lot of sense that we need to look into. And we're doing due diligence on a lot at the moment. But since last February when we started, we've made a handful of investments. We've got 191 million in the fund now, and we'll be deploying that into the technology we think will be most practical for a Kiwi farmer. Biolumic, you heard about that yesterday. So that's actually New Zealand-founded business, biotech company using, this flashed at me, using UV light to modify the gene expression of ryegrass. Ryegrass, the dominant New Zealand pasture grass. Modifying it to increase the lipid content, which actually in turn increases productivity and reduces emissions. So we think that's a really practical solution, and it's actually no real regulatory barriers either. Kia Bio, a Kiwi guy is leading this company. It's a US startup specifically set up by Breakthrough Ventures, founded by Bill Gates, to try and solve the methane vaccine situation. A methane vaccine is a very practical tool for agricultural emissions because it's low input, low cost, and can be practically applied across a huge part of the globe easily into those low input systems. Ruminant Biotech, a New Zealand company who are focused on how do we find a delivery mechanism for an inhibitor in a pasture-based system, so a controlled, slow-release bolus. Hoofprint Biome, using genetic editing techniques. Even though we don't have that approved yet in New Zealand, genetic editing can offer real potential for increasing the activity of probiotic enzyme solutions that might work to increase productivity for a cow, but also potentially 80% reduction in methane. So that's really promising. We're also looking at the vaccine research and inhibitor program being done in New Zealand for a long time. So since 2007, New Zealand's been looking at a vaccine solution, a methane vaccine for ruminants. We're now investing to spin out a venture for that specifically to then seek external funding. So global philanthropic organisations like Bezos Earth, the Gates Foundation, the Grantham Foundation are all sitting up and paying attention to the climate opportunity, but also the market opportunity of solving a methane vaccine solution. So the whole point here is accelerating these innovations. If you've got ideas, please come and talk to me afterwards. Always got to shout that out. So we're taking a portfolio approach. You know, there's not going to be a single silver bullet. We use the term now silver buckshot. Not completely wild darts in the dark, but we're going to have to try a few things, and you can see on the screen some of the things where we've already made investments, but we're looking hard at all of the areas of that portfolio. And actually intentionally, there's a very big chunk that says unknowns, and that's intentional. I travelled to a conference earlier this year in March, World Agritech, Animal Agtech. I was there 1 year earlier as well when I just started with AgriZero. The amount of new startups and ventures present this year that had a solution for methane or nitrous oxide felt like it had quadrupled. Like there's a real focus that this is a gap that hasn't been fully addressed in solutions for emissions for livestock in a pasture-based system. So really great, because the more innovation, the better as far as we're concerned, because we look in New Zealand, but we also look offshore for practical solutions. Genetics, permanent, cumulative. No change to the farming system, won't leave a residue, so that's an attractive proposition, a small slither that will grow over time. And we're thinking, how do we accelerate that great work done at AgResearch and Suzanne Rowe on the sheep genetics, for example? What is our part to play there? Inhibitors, a lot of that is about looking at the delivery mechanism in a pasture-based system. We know there is up to 50% in some regions of dairy farmers do feed their animals in the shed twice a day when they're milking. But for the rest, what do we do? So, we're really focused on a pasture-based system, knowing that we're going to have a few steps along the way, and our investment is really to try and support the AgriZero ambition that's been signed up to by all the CEs of our shareholders is supporting a 30% reduction in emissions of methane and nitrous oxide by 2030 and near zero by 2040. And that is intentionally much more aggressive than New Zealand government's. I just want to finish on a note of optimism. New Zealand farmers are so innovative that I know we're going to crack this gnarly problem. Our farmers are so respected globally. When you go offshore, you say you're from New Zealand, everybody pays attention. It's actually very good for the ego, and I wish some of the New Zealand farmers who feel a bit downtrodden right now could see that themselves. Because you mentioned you're from New Zealand, they're asking you all about, what does New Zealand think of this? What does New Zealand think of that? You know, I listened to a session about a new technology being applied across rangelands in the US, enabled by the virtual fences. And it was rotational grazing that my grandfather was doing in Southland a long, long time ago. So, you know, we've got this, New Zealand. I really think we do. And with the incentives, with the finance, with the research coming in, I know that we're going to have an amazing impact globally. But right now is not the time to be complacent. We've got 5 lactations left till it's 2030. We've got 5 lambings left till it's 2030. So, you know, if there's ever a time to put the pedal to the metal, that is now. Kia ora.